On today's show, we'll visit a treasure house of racing lore at the Indy 500 Museum. And the wide-open freestyle racing of Can-Am cars is revisited at the Vintage Races. Plus, Smokey Yunick, a name synonymous with high performance for nearly 40 years. Today, we're here at the Orange Empire Museum, home of some very unique and historic old trains. There are a lot of museums around the country, but perhaps one of the most famous and dedicated to preserving our strong racing heritage is the Indy 500 Museum.
Gentlemen, start your engines.
They're the most famous words in racing, bringing to mind the legends of the sport, and the greatest legend of all, the Indianapolis 500.
And here they come down the straightaway, gaining...
A legend encapsulated in a Hall of Fame on the most revered 2.5 miles of pavement in the world, the famed Brickyard.
I've been to a lot of sporting events, and the start of our event, the start of the Indianapolis 500, is second to none in terms of the thrill and the excitement of actually being there for the spectator. So if our museum can give people just a small inclination of what that's like, then we're accomplishing something.
Kent Lippick is responsible for overseeing its operations. In a sense, the Hall of Fame is the Brickyard's biographer, telling a story that stretches back to the early part of this century. Carl Fisher, who bought 350 acres outside Indianapolis to build a racetrack which would afford automobile builders the opportunity to test and improve the design of American-built cars. A legacy it carries on today.
In the early 1900s, the car that raced on the racetrack was literally the car you bought off the showroom floor.
The first Indy 500 winner in 1911 was this Marmon Wasp, built in downtown Indianapolis.
It was one of the first cars, and I can't really document that it was the first, but definitely one of the first cars to use what we now call the rear view mirror, which you can see here, and that's how Ray Haroon, the driver of this car, was able to get away without having a riding mechanic.
European car makers were quick to see the opportunity the race presented, and for many years, Italian Fiats and French Stellages were serious challengers to the American-made cars. In 1927, the track was sold to World War I flying ace Eddie Rickenbacker. He carried on the legacy of encouraging innovative designs, like this 1932 winner, a Miller Hart Special with front-wheel drive. By the time Wilbur Shaw rode to his third Indy win in 1937 in this supercharged Maserati, the race was firmly established as the preeminent international event. World War II brought that to a screeching halt.
When Mr. Hallman bought the Speedway in '46, the biggest obstacle in front of him was to bring the track up to a condition where we could compete safely on the racetrack, and that's what he's done, and of course his family has carried through that tradition to today.
With Hallman, the Speedway rose to new heights.
It's the largest single-day sporting event in the world, bar none. When a driver comes down the straightaway here, he sees literally masses of humanity, hundreds of thousands of people.
In the modern era, the names of those who have conquered Indy reads like a who's who of the sport.
And here's the checkered flag for Mario Andretti. For Al Unser, winner.
For Rick Mears of Bakersfield, California.
For Johnny Rutherford, winner.
But none are more imposing than that of A.J. Foyt.
The checkered flag is out. A.J.'s hand in the air. He is the winner. A.J.
He's obviously probably the greatest American race car driver ever. And we felt it was very, very appropriate to have a display honoring him. We do have all four of the cars that he won with here, which would be his 1961, 1964, 1967, and of course his 1977 car.
Among the other displays at the museum are a collection of priceless Grand Prix cars, including the most famous race car of all time, the stunningly beautiful Mercedes W196.
The most enjoyable tasks I have is bringing somebody into the museum that's never been here before. They always expect to see some Indianapolis race cars, but are totally amazed to see a Mercedes W196, which somebody like Sterling Moss drove in the 1950s. or to see a 250 LM Ferrari, which won Le Mans 1965, or cars like that, or cars that are of that kind of significance.
The exhibit is constantly being upgraded. A recent addition is this 1990 Domino's Indy winner driven by R.E. Lyondike.
Prior to that car, we had not had a car that had won the 500 donated to the museum since 1983. So that was a very, I would have to say, the most significant donation we've received in several years.
In the Tony Hulman Theater, there's a continual running of the history of the Indy 500. The story it tells is about a legacy of automotive inventiveness and excellence, which is why cars like this rear-engine Lotus-powered Ford, the first rear-engine car to win Indy, and this collection of power plants carry a significance that goes far beyond that of racing.
We're really here strictly to educate the public about the history of our race and how it relates to the progress of the automotive industry.
Like the race, the Hall of Fame's popularity outstrips all others. Inside this national landmark is not only some of the priceless artifacts of racing, but a living document of man's relationship to his most beloved machine. Although the stands are now silent, come May, they will be filled with hundreds of thousands of spectators waiting to hear those four magic words.
Gentlemen, start your engine.
Next, the thunder of the Can-Am cars is back at the vintage races, and a look at a legend in the world of motorsports, Smokey Unit.